My millionaire daughter gave her mother-in-law a beach mansion for Christmas. For me, a $30 massage voucher. I smiled and left quietly. The next morning, the documents I left on her doorstep revealed the truth. That loving family was bleeding her dry. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back to how this whole mess started. Because trust me, what happened next was something no one saw coming. 3 months earlier, I was just Margaret Walsh, a 62-year-old retired schoolteacher from Denver, Colorado. My biggest worry was whether my tomatoes would survive the early frost. I lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house I'd bought 30 years ago when my husband died, leaving me with a 10-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical bills. That daughter, Emma, had always been brilliant. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Stanford, MBA from Wharton. While her classmates were partying, she was building business plans. By 35, she'd sold her tech startup for $87 million. Overnight, my little girl who used to eat cereal for dinner became one of Denver's wealthiest women. I was proud of her. Of course I was. But success changes people, and money changes them even more. The transformation started slowly. Emma moved into a mansion in Cherry Hills Village, the kind of place where the driveways cost more than most people's houses. She hired a personal chef, a housekeeper, and a stylist who charged more per session than I spent on groceries in a month. Then she met Bradley Morrison. Bradley was everything Emma thought she wanted in a husband. Tall, charming, Harvard Law School graduate with a trust fund and family money dating back to railroad barons. Their wedding was featured in Colorado Lifestyle magazine. The reception alone cost more than my annual pension. What bothered me wasn't the money she was spending. It was hers to spend. What bothered me were the little things. The way Bradley's eyes would light up when Emma mentioned a new investment. How his mother, Patricia Morrison, suddenly needed constant financial help despite supposedly coming from old money. At Christmas dinner last year, Patricia had tearfully explained how their family estate was being foreclosed on. Such a shame, she'd said, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. 3 generations of Morrisons, and now it would be sold to developers. Emma, being Emma, immediately offered to help. Not a loan, a gift, purely out of the goodness of her heart. That was strike 1, but I kept my mouth shut. Strike 2 came when Bradley's investment firm needed capital. Another tearful family meeting, another generous gift from my daughter. $2.5 million this time. I started asking questions. Gentle ones, because I knew how Emma got when she thought someone was criticizing her husband. "Mom," she'd said, "you wouldn't understand business. You were a teacher." That stung, as if spending 40 years educating children didn't require intelligence or judgment. But I kept watching, and what I saw made my stomach turn. The way Patricia's tears would stop the moment Emma left the room. How Bradley would immediately check his phone whenever Emma mentioned her account balances. The subtle eye contact between them when Emma wasn't looking, like they were sharing some private joke. I'd tried to talk to Emma about it 3 weeks before Christmas. I'd chosen my words carefully, suggesting maybe they should slow down with the financial gifts until everyone knew each other better. Emma's response was swift and cold. "Mom, I think you're jealous. You've never had money, so you don't understand how family businesses work." Family businesses. Right. The same family that had needed $3 million in 8 months. Which brings us back to Christmas morning. I'd arrived at Emma's mansion at 9 a.m., carrying the presents I'd carefully chosen and wrapped. A beautiful cashmere scarf for Emma, a nice bottle of wine for Bradley, a gardening book for Patricia, who'd mentioned loving flowers. The living room looked like something from a magazine. A 12-foot Christmas tree covered in ornaments that probably cost more than my car. Presents wrapped in paper so expensive it seemed criminal to tear it open. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement as she announced she had special surprises for everyone. Bradley opened his first, keys to a new Mercedes-AMG, $70,000 of pure German engineering. Patricia went next. Emma handed her an envelope with trembling hands, tears already forming. "I know how much the family estate means to you," Emma said softly. "So I bought it back," Patricia screamed. Actually screamed with joy. The estate was worth $2.8 million. Emma had purchased it, renovated it, and was gifting it to her mother-in-law for Christmas. The hugs, the tears, the gratitude. It was like watching a Hallmark movie. If Hallmark movies featured people spending enough money to fund a small town's budget. Then Emma turned to me, her smile bright and expectant. "And for you, Mom." She handed me a small envelope. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe this was a deed to a little cottage somewhere, or stocks, or... I opened the envelope and stared. A gift certificate to Heavenly Touch Massage. $30? Good for one 30-minute massage at the strip mall location. The room went silent. Bradley cleared his throat awkwardly. Patricia studied her manicure. Emma was still smiling, but there was something cold in her eyes, something that said, "This is what you get for questioning my choices." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said quietly. "This is very thoughtful." I folded the certificate, put it in my purse, and stood up. "I should head home. Let you all enjoy your Christmas." "But Mom, we haven't had dinner yet," Emma protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm actually quite tired. You understand." I kissed Emma's cheek, nodded politely to Bradley and Patricia, and walked out. In my car, I sat in Emma's circular driveway for exactly 3 minutes, staring at the mansion I'd just left. Through the windows, I could see my daughter's new family celebrating their expensive gifts. That's when I realized the truth that would change everything. This wasn't about the money. This was about respect. And my daughter had just shown me exactly how much respect she had for the woman who'd raised her. But here's what Emma didn't know about her old-fashioned schoolteacher mother. I hadn't spent 40 years dealing with teenage troublemakers without learning a thing or two about investigation. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would unravel Bradley and Patricia Morrison's entire life. But first, I had some digging to do. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that $30 massage voucher contrasted against the image of Patricia Morrison's tears of joy over a $3 million mansion. 29 years I'd raised Emma alone. 29 years of PB&J sandwiches for lunch so she could have music lessons. 29 years of shopping at thrift stores so she could have the laptop she needed for school. 29 years of working summer jobs grading papers to pay for her college visits. And this was my reward. A discount massage certificate. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my entire career teaching children the difference between right and wrong, and somehow I'd raised a daughter who thought humiliating me in front of her husband's family was acceptable behavior. But as I lay in my bedroom that night, something else kept nagging at me. Something about the whole scene felt staged. I'd been a teacher long enough to recognize when someone was performing. And Patricia Morrison's reaction to that envelope had felt like a performance. The timing was too perfect, the emotion too immediate, the gratitude too theatrical. Real surprised joy has a different quality. It's messy, confused, delayed. Patricia's response had been polished. At 6 a.m., I got up and made coffee. Then I did something I hadn't done since Emma was 16, and I'd suspected her of sneaking out at night. I started investigating. First, I Googled Morrison Estate Denver. What I found was interesting. The property had indeed been foreclosed on, but not by a bank. According to public records, it had been seized by the IRS for unpaid taxes. The Morrisons hadn't lost their family fortune to bad investments. They'd lost it by not paying their taxes. That seemed like the kind of detail Patricia might have glossed over in her tearful family meetings. Next, I looked up Bradley's investment firm, Morrison Capital Advisors. Their website was beautiful, professional, convincing. Photos of Bradley in expensive suits, testimonials from satisfied clients, impressive charts showing portfolio growth. But when I dug deeper, things got interesting. Morrison Capital Advisors had been incorporated exactly 13 months ago, right around the time Bradley had started dating Emma. Before that, there was no trace of Bradley Morrison working in finance anywhere. I spent 3 hours that morning going down internet rabbit holes. Social media profiles, business registration records, anything I could find about my daughter's new family. What I discovered made my coffee go cold. Patricia Morrison's Facebook profile showed her living in a tiny apartment in Aurora just 2 years ago. The photos from that time showed someone who shopped at Target and drove a beat-up Honda Civic. Hardly the lifestyle of someone from old railroad money. Bradley's LinkedIn profile was even more interesting. It showed a gap in employment from 2019 to 2022. 3 years where the Harvard Law graduate apparently wasn't working anywhere. But here's what really caught my attention. Both Bradley and Patricia had only existed online since 2022. No digital footprint before that. No old photos with friends, no college memories, no family history. It was as if Bradley and Patricia Morrison had simply materialized out of thin air right before meeting Emma. By noon, I'd made a decision. I was going to call my friend Janet Henderson. Janet and I had taught together for 15 years before she retired and moved to Florida. What I hadn't told anyone was that Janet's retirement hobby was genealogy research. She'd become frighteningly good at tracing family histories and finding information that people preferred to keep hidden. "Margaret," Janet's voice was warm and familiar when she answered. "What a lovely surprise. How was Christmas?" "Complicated," I said. "Janet, I need a favor, and I need you to keep this between us." I explained what I'd discovered about Bradley and Patricia. Janet listened without interrupting, making the occasional sound that meant her investigative instincts were kicking in. "Send me their names, birth dates if you have them, and any photos," she said when I finished. "Give me 48 hours. Janet, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being a jealous mother who can't accept that her daughter doesn't need her anymore?" There was a long pause. "Honey, in my experience, teachers who spend their careers studying human behavior don't develop paranoid tendencies in retirement. Trust your instincts." That afternoon, my phone rang. "Emma." "Mom, you left so quickly yesterday. I wanted to make sure you're okay." Her voice was careful, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired." "Good, because Bradley and Patricia felt terrible about the gift situation. They're worried you think they're taking advantage of my generosity." "Interesting. So they were worried about something. Why would I think that?" "Well, you've made some comments recently about our financial arrangements. They're concerned you might misunderstand their situation." "What situation is that?" "Emma?" Another pause. "Mom, you know they come from old money. Sometimes families like that have complicated financial structures, trusts, estate issues, things that might look unusual to outsiders." Complicated financial structures. That was a new one. "Of course," I said. "I'm just a simple school teacher. I wouldn't understand complex family finances." "Mom, don't be like that." "Like what?" "You're using that tone you used to use when I was in trouble at school." Smart girl. She was right. It was exactly the tone I used when I knew a student was lying to me. "Emma, I want you to know something. I love you. I will always love you. Nothing will ever change that. I love you too, Mom." "Good, because love means wanting what's best for someone, even when they can't see it themselves." "What do you mean?" "Nothing, sweetheart. I'll talk to you soon." After hanging up, I realized something had shifted in my relationship with my daughter. For the first time in her adult life, I knew something she didn't, and if my suspicions were correct, what I was about to learn would change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Started digging. You're going to want to sit down when you hear this." But that revelation would have to wait. Because at that moment, I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Bradley Morrison climbing out of his Mercedes, straightening his tie and walking toward my front door. He was alone, and from the look on his face, this wasn't a social visit. I watched Bradley through my kitchen window as he approached my front door. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from a lifetime of getting what you want. But there was something different about him today, something careful, calculating. When the doorbell rang, I took my time answering. Let him wait. Let him wonder what I knew. "Mrs. Walsh," he said when I opened the door, flashing that $1,000,000 smile that had charmed my daughter into marriage. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I wanted to talk to you about yesterday." "Of course. Come in." I led him to the living room, gesturing to my late husband's old chair, while I sat across from him on the sofa. The furniture was older, well used, a stark contrast to the museum-perfect pieces in Emma's mansion. Bradley's eyes took it all in, and I could practically see him calculating the value of everything in the room. "Can I offer you coffee?" I asked. "That would be lovely, thank you." While I prepared the coffee, Bradley studied the family photos on my mantel. Pictures of Emma growing up, graduations, birthdays, all the moments that matter when you're building a family from nothing. "You raised an incredible daughter," he said when I returned with the coffee tray. "I certainly tried." He accepted the cup with the same gracious manner he probably used at charity galas. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm here because I'm concerned. Emma mentioned you've had some reservations about our family's financial situation." I sipped my coffee slowly, buying time. "What kind of reservations?" "Well," Bradley settled back in his chair, "I understand why our circumstances might seem unusual to someone unfamiliar with old family wealth. Trust funds, estate management, tax structures, it can all appear quite mysterious from the outside." Mysterious is one word for it. Bradley's smile never wavered, but I caught something flicker in his eyes. "The thing is, Mrs. Walsh, family reputations are delicate things. When there are questions about legitimacy or propriety, it can be very damaging, not just to Patricia and me, but to Emma as well." Was that a threat? Wrapped in expensive manners and delivered with a Harvard accent, but a threat nonetheless? "What exactly are you asking me to do, Bradley?" "I'm asking you to trust your daughter's judgment. She's a brilliant businesswoman. If she believes in us, perhaps you could find it in your heart to do the same." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "You know what I find interesting, Bradley?" "What's that?" "In all the months you've been part of this family, you've never once asked me about Emma's childhood. Never wanted to see baby pictures or hear funny stories about her growing up. Most men who love my daughter would be curious about her history." Bradley's smile faltered slightly. Well, we focus on the future rather than dwelling on the past." "How convenient." I stood up, moving to the mantel where those family photos were displayed. "Because Emma's past is fascinating. For instance, did you know that when she was 12, she started a neighborhood dog-walking business? Made enough money to buy her own school supplies that year? That's lovely. She was always good at reading people. Could tell which dogs were friendly and which ones might bite just by watching their body language for a few minutes." I picked up a photo of teenage Emma, smiling in her graduation cap and gown. "She got that skill from me, I suppose. 30 years of teaching gives you a sixth sense about people. You learn to spot the troublemakers, the liars, the ones who think they're smarter than everyone else." Bradley was no longer smiling. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying that my daughter might have excellent business instincts, but she's always had a blind spot when it comes to people who tell her what she wants to hear." "And what is it you think I'm telling her?" I turned to face him directly. "That you need her money because of family honor and complicated circumstances, rather than the simpler truth that you need her money because you don't have any of your own." The mask finally slipped. For just a moment, Bradley's charming facade cracked, and I saw something cold and predatory underneath. "You're Emma's mother," he said slowly, "so I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened. But Mrs. Walsh, I would strongly advise you to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove." "Is that a threat, Bradley?" "It's friendly advice. Emma values family harmony very highly. It would be a shame if anyone disrupted that harmony with unfounded conspiracy theories." After Bradley left, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking. The man who just walked out my door had revealed more in 30 minutes than he'd probably intended. First, he knew I was suspicious, which meant Emma had told him about our conversations. Second, he was worried enough about those suspicions to come here personally. Third, he'd just threatened me, politely but unmistakably. But most importantly, he'd made a mistake. He'd assumed I was just a worried mother with vague concerns about her daughter's happiness. He had no idea I was conducting an actual investigation. My phone rang just as I was washing the coffee cups. "Janet." "Margaret, you sitting down?" "I am now. What did you find?" "Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you're absolutely right to be suspicious. The bad news is it's worse than you thought." I gripped the phone tighter. "Tell me, Bradley Morrison and Patricia Morrison don't exist." "Well, they exist now, but they didn't before 2022. The identities are completely fabricated." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean, fabricated?" "Professional job, new social security numbers, credit histories, educational records, the works. Someone paid serious money to create these people from scratch. But their backgrounds check out. Harvard Law School, the family estate, all fake. Harvard has no record of a Bradley Morrison graduating in any of their law programs. Ever. The Morrison estate your daughter bought? It belonged to a family named Kowalski who lost it in the housing crisis 10 years ago. Patricia Morrison never lived there." I sank onto my sofa, mind reeling. So who are they, really? That's where it gets interesting. Based on the facial recognition software I ran through some unofficial channels, your son-in-law is actually Marcus Delacroix, a con artist from New Orleans who specialized in romance scams until 2021. And Patricia? Nicole Beaumont, also from New Orleans. She's Marcus's partner, not his mother. They've been running long-term cons for years, targeting wealthy women. The room felt like it was spinning. How many women? At least 4 that I could find. All wealthy, all lonely, all separated from significant amounts of money before the relationship ended. Margaret, these people are professional thieves. I closed my eyes, thinking about Emma, my brilliant, successful, vulnerable daughter who'd never learned to guard her heart because she'd never needed to. There's more, Janet continued. I found a police report from Houston. Marcus and Nicole were questioned in connection with the death of a previous Mark, a wealthy widow who died under suspicious circumstances after changing her will. No charges were filed, but, oh my God, Margaret, you need to call the police. Tonight. I can't. Not yet. I have no proof they've done anything illegal here. Emma will think I'm crazy, and worse, she'll warn them I'm onto them. So what are you going to do? I looked out my window toward the direction of Emma's mansion, where my daughter was probably planning her future with 2 people who wanted to rob her blind. I'm going to get proof. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I'd already made my first mistake. I'd let Bradley know I was suspicious. And if Marcus Delacroix was as dangerous as Janet's research suggested, that might have been a fatal error. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me jump. A tree branch against the window, the furnace kicking on, the neighbor's cat walking across my porch. Bradley's, Marcus's, parting words kept replaying in my mind. It would be a shame if anyone disrupted that harmony with unfounded conspiracy theories. At 3 a.m., I got up and checked all my door locks twice. By morning, I'd made a decision. If Marcus and Nicole were professional con artists, they'd be careful about electronic communications. But they were also human, and humans make mistakes when they think they're safe. I needed to get close enough to catch them making one of those mistakes. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Emma called at 10 a.m., her voice bright with forced cheerfulness. Mom, Patricia and I are going wedding dress shopping this afternoon for her niece's wedding next month. Would you like to join us? I thought it might be a good chance for you 2 to bond. Perfect. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. Really? Emma sounded genuinely surprised. I thought you might be busy. Never too busy for family, I said, putting just enough warmth in my voice to sound convincing. Wonderful. We're meeting at the bridal boutique in Cherry Creek at 2 p.m. After hanging up, I spent 20 minutes figuring out how to activate the voice recording app on my phone. Technology wasn't my strong suit, but desperation is an excellent teacher. The boutique was everything I'd expected, all crystal chandeliers and silk-covered settees, the kind of place where a simple veil costs more than most people spend on their entire wedding. Emma was already there when I arrived, chatting with a saleswoman about styles and budgets. Patricia arrived 15 minutes late, perfectly coiffed and carrying an expensive purse that I now knew she probably couldn't actually afford. Margaret, she exclaimed, kissing my cheek like we were old friends. How wonderful that you could join us. This is going to be such fun. For the next hour, I played the role of the devoted grandmother-in-law, oohing and aahing over dress after dress. Patricia tried on gowns that cost more than my monthly pension, spinning in front of mirrors while Emma and the saleswoman gushed about how stunning she looked. But I was watching faces, not dresses. And what I saw was interesting. Patricia's reactions were studied, carefully calibrated to Emma's responses. When Emma admired a particular detail, Patricia would suddenly discover she loved that exact same feature. When Emma seemed less enthusiastic, Patricia would frown and declare the dress wasn't quite right. More telling were the moments when Patricia thought no one was looking, the brief flashes of impatience when Emma was distracted, the way she checked her phone constantly as if waiting for important news, the dismissive glances she shot at the saleswoman when the woman suggested less expensive alternatives. This was a woman playing a role, and she was getting tired of the performance. My moment came when Emma stepped outside to take a call from her office. The saleswoman went to the back room to find more options. For exactly 90 seconds, Patricia and I were alone in the fitting area. Patricia immediately dropped her grandmother act, pulling out her phone and texting rapidly. I pretended to look through a rack of veils while positioning myself close enough to overhear if she made a call. She did. "It's me," she said quietly, her voice suddenly lower, sharper. "The old lady was asking questions yesterday. Bradley handled it, but she's not backing off." "No, she doesn't know anything concrete, but she's suspicious. I know what the timeline is. I'm just saying we might need to move faster." My blood turned to ice. Timeline for what? "The trust fund documentation will be ready next week," Patricia continued. "Once Emma signs those papers, we'll have access to everything. Yes, I understand the risks, but sitting on this much money makes me nervous. Too many things can go wrong." I heard Emma's voice getting closer as she finished her call. "I have to go," Patricia whispered. "But Marcus, we need to talk tonight. Things are getting complicated." Marcus. She'd used his real name. By the time Emma returned, Patricia had transformed back into the doting mother-in-law, admiring a particularly expensive dress with theatrical enthusiasm. "This one is perfect," she declared. "Emma, you have such wonderful taste." "Actually," Emma said, "I think we should ask Mom what she thinks." "Mom, what's your opinion?" I looked at Patricia, meeting her eyes directly. "I think some things aren't what they appear to be, but the truth has a way of coming out eventually." Patricia's smile never wavered, but I saw her hands clench slightly. "How profound," she said. "You're absolutely right. Authenticity is so important, don't you think?" The drive home was torture. Emma chattered happily about wedding plans and family bonding while I sat in the passenger seat, my phone in my purse with 90 seconds of recorded conversation that proved my daughter was being targeted by professional criminals. But when I tried to replay the recording at home, my heart sank. The audio was muffled, unclear, impossible to understand without knowing what to listen for. No court would consider it evidence. Emma certainly wouldn't. I needed more. Something undeniable. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my nephew Tommy in Chicago. Tommy was my late sister's boy, now 38, and working in what he vaguely described as computer security. Growing up, he'd been the kid who could hack into the school's computer system just to prove he could. I'd always disapproved of his rebellious streak. Tonight, I was counting on it. "Aunt Margaret, this is unexpected. How are you doing?" "Tommy, I need a favor. And I need you to not ask too many questions about why." There was a pause. "Okay, what kind of favor?" "I need someone's phone records, text messages, call history, everything." Another pause. Longer this time. "Aunt Margaret, that's not exactly legal." "I know. I'm asking anyway. This isn't like you. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "Someone is trying to hurt Emma financially, possibly physically. I have evidence they're criminals, but not enough to convince her or the police." Jesus. "Okay, send me whatever information you have about these people. But Aunt Margaret, if we do this, you need to understand the risks. If we get caught, I understand. Tommy, there's something else. I think they might be planning to speed up whatever they're doing. Tonight on the phone, the woman mentioned a timeline and said they might need to move faster. How much faster? I don't know. But I got the impression it was soon. Then we don't have time for the subtle approach. Send me their phone numbers, full names, real and fake, and any other information you have. I'll see what I can find tonight." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing down everything I knew about Marcus and Nicole. Every detail from their first meetings with Emma, every story they'd told about their backgrounds, every financial request they'd made. Looking at it all laid out, the pattern was obvious. They'd systematically isolated Emma from anyone who might question their motives, convinced her to make increasingly large financial commitments, and were now pushing toward some kind of final score. The trust fund documents Patricia had mentioned. What were those? Emma had never said anything about setting up a trust fund. My phone buzzed at 11 p.m. A text from Tommy. "You were right to be worried. Call me, now." When I called him back, his voice was grim. "Aunt Margaret, these people are more dangerous than you realized. I found their communications, and you need to hear this immediately." "What did you find?" "Text messages from today. They're not just planning to rob Emma. They're planning to kill her." The room started spinning. "What?" "After she signs some trust fund papers next week. They've been researching ways to make it look like an accident. Car crashes, home invasions, medical emergencies. Aunt Margaret, Emma has maybe 5 days before they put whatever plan they've chosen into motion. I dropped the phone. 5 days to save my daughter's life, and she still didn't even know she was in danger. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face when she'd shown me that $30 massage voucher. The hurt in her eyes when I'd questioned her financial arrangements with Bradley, the way she'd defended him just yesterday afternoon. How do you tell your daughter that the man she loves is planning to murder her? Tommy had forwarded me screenshots of the text messages between Marcus and Nicole. Reading them was like watching my daughter's death being planned in real time. Car accident too messy. Police investigate those thoroughly now. Home invasion better. Lots of break-ins in Cherry Hills lately. Pills easiest. Make it look like accidental overdose. Wealthy people take lots of prescription meds anyway. Need her to sign trust papers first. Tuesday appointment confirmed with lawyer. Today was Thursday. The lawyer appointment was in 5 days. At 6 a.m., I called Tommy back. I can't just hand these to the police, I told him. The messages were obtained illegally, and even if they believed me, it would take time to build a case. Emma could be dead by then. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to record them confessing. Aunt Margaret, that's incredibly dangerous. If they suspect you know, they already suspect I know something. Bradley, Marcus, came to my house yesterday to warn me off. I think I'm next on their list after Emma. There was a long pause. Then we need to move fast. I can help you set up recording equipment, but you'll need to get them talking about their plans. How? Give them a reason to panic. Make them think their timeline is compromised. I spent the morning working out a plan that was probably going to get me killed, but might save Emma's life. At noon, I called my daughter. Emma, sweetheart, I need to apologize for my behavior lately. I've been letting my worries about money cloud my judgment about Bradley and Patricia. Oh, Mom. Emma's voice was warm with relief. I'm so glad you called. I've been feeling terrible about our relationship. I was wondering if we could have a family dinner tonight. All 4 of us. I'd like to start fresh with Bradley and Patricia. That's a wonderful idea. Should we meet at a restaurant? Actually, I was hoping you could all come here. I'd like to cook for my new family. Emma sounded surprised but pleased. Of course. What time? 7 o'clock. And Emma? Could you ask Bradley to bring those trust fund documents Patricia mentioned? I'd like to understand the family financial structure better. Another pause. Trust fund documents? Yes. Patricia mentioned them yesterday at the dress shop. She said they were finalizing some paperwork with a lawyer next week. I don't know anything about trust fund documents, Mom. Perfect. Now Emma would ask Bradley about them, and he'd have to scramble to come up with an explanation. That kind of pressure makes people say things they shouldn't. That afternoon, Tommy arrived at my house with a suitcase full of equipment I didn't understand. Tiny microphones, recording devices, something that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. This will record everything, he said, showing me a device no bigger than a quarter. I'll be in a van outside monitoring the feed. If things go bad, I'll call the police. What if they search me? They won't. These people are con artists, not professional killers. They're going to be focused on damage control, not physical security. By 6 p.m., my house was wired for sound and video. I'd cooked Emma's favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings, and set my dining room table with my mother's china. If this was going to be my last dinner with my daughter, I wanted it to be memorable. Emma arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and looking happier than I'd seen her in months. Mom, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Family is everything. Bradley and Patricia arrived together 20 minutes later. Bradley was carrying a manila folder, and both of them looked tense despite their smiles. Mrs. Walsh, Bradley said, kissing my cheek, thank you so much for this invitation. Patricia and I were thrilled when Emma told us. Dinner started pleasantly enough. I asked about their holiday plans, complimented Patricia's dress, even managed to laugh at one of Bradley's stories about his supposed Harvard classmates. But I was watching their faces, and what I saw was 2 people trying very hard to seem relaxed while calculating whether I was a threat. After the main course, I served coffee and brought up the topic I'd been waiting for. Bradley, Emma mentioned you brought some documents to show me. Something about a trust fund? Bradley and Patricia exchanged a quick glance. Emma looked confused. Actually, Emma said, I asked Bradley about that after we talked, Mom. I don't know anything about any trust fund documents. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Oh, I said innocently. I must have misunderstood what Patricia said at the boutique. Patricia's smile was strained. I think there might have been some confusion. We were discussing several different legal matters. What legal matters? Emma asked, turning to look at her husband. Bradley cleared his throat. Well, darling, Patricia and I have been working with attorneys to restructure some of our family holdings. Tax purposes, estate planning, that sort of thing. What family holdings? Emma's voice was getting sharper. Bradley, you told me your family lost everything in the foreclosure. Another glance between Marcus and Nicole. This was it, the moment when their story started falling apart. Not everything, Bradley said carefully. There are still some assets in various trusts and accounts. It's complicated. How complicated? Emma set down her coffee cup. And why is this the first I'm hearing about it? Patricia jumped in. Emma, dear, these are very sensitive financial matters. The kind of thing that requires discretion. Discretion from who? I'm his wife. Well, Patricia continued, family money often comes with conditions, confidentiality requirements, restrictions on disclosure. Emma stood up abruptly. Stop. Just stop. Bradley, I want you to explain to me right now what's going on. What trust funds? What confidentiality requirements? What assets? Bradley's mask was slipping. I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized their careful con was unraveling. Emma, please sit down. Let me explain. I'm listening. The truth is, when Patricia and I told you about our financial difficulties, we weren't being completely honest about the scope of our holdings. There are still significant assets, but they're tied up in complex legal structures. So you lied to me. We simplified the situation to avoid overwhelming you with technical details. Emma turned to Patricia. And you cried about losing the family estate. You took $3 million from me when you already had money? Patricia's composure cracked. Emma, you don't understand how these things work. Family wealth isn't just sitting in checking accounts. It takes time to access. Time? You needed time? So you decided to use my money as a bridge loan without telling me? It wasn't supposed to happen this way, Patricia said, her voice rising. We were going to pay you back once the trust documents were finalized. What trust documents? Emma shouted. That's when Bradley made his fatal mistake. The ones that give us access to your accounts, he snapped, then immediately went white as he realized what he'd just said. The room went dead silent. Emma stared at her husband like she'd never seen him before. What did you just say? That came out wrong. You said my accounts. Why would trust documents for your family money give you access to my accounts? Bradley looked at Patricia, panic clear on his face. Patricia looked back at him. And I saw something pass between them. A decision. Because, Emma, Patricia said quietly, the trust documents name you as the primary beneficiary of our estate. We thought it would be a wonderful surprise. It was a good lie. Quick thinking under pressure. But Emma was too smart, and she'd heard too much already. Show me the documents, she said. What? Show me the trust documents. Right now. Bradley opened the manila folder with shaking hands and pulled out a stack of papers. Emma grabbed them and started reading. I couldn't see the papers from where I sat, but I didn't need to. Emma's face told me everything I needed to know. These aren't trust fund documents, she said slowly. These are power of attorney forms. Financial power of attorney forms that would give you complete control over all my assets. The game was over. Bradley and Patricia knew it. I knew it. And finally, thank God, Emma knew it too. But what happened next would determine whether my daughter lived to see another Christmas. Because cornered con artists are the most dangerous kind. These aren't trust fund documents, Emma said slowly, her voice deadly calm. These are power of attorney forms. Financial power of attorney forms that would give you complete control over all my assets. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, the distant sound of traffic outside. But in my dining room, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Bradley's face had gone completely white. Patricia looked like she was calculating distances to the nearest exit. And Emma, my brilliant, trusting daughter, looked like someone had just explained to her that everything she'd believed about love and marriage was a lie, which, I supposed, someone just had. Emma, Bradley started, his voice shaking. You don't understand what you're looking at. I understand perfectly, she said, never taking her eyes off the papers. This document would give you the right to access my bank accounts, sell my investments, even put my house up for sale, all without my permission. It's not what it looks like. Really? Emma's voice was getting louder. Because what it looks like is that my husband and his mother have been planning to steal everything I own. Patricia finally spoke up, her grandmother act completely abandoned. Emma, you're being dramatic. These are standard estate planning documents that married couples. Standard for what? Standard for theft? I decided it was time to add fuel to this fire before they managed to talk their way out of it. Emma, I said quietly, there's something else you should know. Every eye in the room turned to me. Bradley looked terrified. He should have been. Patricia made a phone call today at the bridal shop when she thought no one was listening. Mom, what are you talking about? She called someone named Marcus, talked about moving faster than planned because I was asking too many questions. The effect was immediate. Bradley went from white to green, and Patricia actually took a step backward. That's not, Patricia stammered. Marcus. Emma turned to stare at Bradley. Who's Marcus? I don't know anyone named Marcus, Bradley said, but his voice cracked on the lie. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd made at the boutique. It was muffled, but Patricia's voice was clearly audible saying Marcus's name. Emma listened to the entire thing twice. When it finished, she looked at her husband like she'd never seen him before. Your real name is Marcus, isn't it? Bradley's shoulders slumped in defeat. Emma, I can explain. Can you explain why your mother called you by a different name? Can you explain why you have power of attorney documents prepared without telling me? Can you explain why you need to move faster because my mother is asking questions? Yes, I can explain all of it. Then start explaining. Bradley glanced at Patricia, and I saw something pass between them. A moment of silent communication. Then Bradley straightened his shoulders and transformed back into the charming man who'd swept my daughter off her feet. The truth is, Emma, our situation is more complicated than we've told you. Yes, my legal name is Marcus Bradley Morrison. I go by Bradley because Marcus is associated with some unpleasant family history. The power of attorney documents were prepared as a precaution because of some ongoing legal issues with our estate. He was smooth, I had to give him that, taking just enough truth and wrapping it in just enough lies to sound believable. What kind of legal issues? Emma asked. The IRS has been challenging some aspects of our family trust. They've threatened to freeze our assets while they conduct their investigation. The power of attorney was suggested by our lawyers as a way to protect your assets in case they decide to expand their inquiry. It was a beautiful lie. Sophisticated, detailed, just plausible enough to give Emma hope that there was an innocent explanation for everything. But I had one more card to play. That's interesting, Bradley, I said. Or should I call you Marcus? Or would you prefer Marcus Delacroix? The reaction was instantaneous. Patricia gasped audibly. Bradley went completely rigid, and Emma looked between us with growing alarm. What did you just say? Emma asked. I said your husband's real name is Marcus Delacroix. He's a con artist from New Orleans who specializes in targeting wealthy women, and Patricia isn't his mother. She's his partner. Her real name is Nicole Beaumont. Emma stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. Mom, that's insane. You can't just... I can prove it, I interrupted. I spent yesterday doing research. Real research, Emma. Police records, facial recognition software, the works. I pulled out the folder of information Janet had sent me. Photos of Marcus and Nicole from previous cons, police reports, newspaper articles about their other victims. This is your husband in Houston 2 years ago, calling himself Bradford Mitchell, engaged to a wealthy widow named Helen Crawford. This is Patricia, Nicole, in Phoenix, claiming to be his aunt, helping him access Helen's accounts. Emma grabbed the papers from my hands, studying them with the same intensity she'd once applied to business plans and financial reports. This woman died, she said quietly, looking at a newspaper clipping about Helen Crawford's fatal car accident. 3 days after changing her will to leave everything to Bradford Mitchell, I confirmed. And this one? Emma picked up another report. Diane Foster, Orlando. Mysterious overdose 6 months after marrying your husband when he was calling himself Blake Morrison. Another convenient accident right after she'd signed over power of attorney. Emma was turning pages faster now, seeing the pattern emerge. 4 different cities, 4 different names, 4 wealthy women who'd fallen in love with the charming man now sitting in my dining room. And this? She held up a police report with photos attached. That's when they got caught in New Orleans. Not enough evidence to prosecute, but enough to make them change cities and identities. Emma looked up at Bradley, Marcus, who was sitting frozen in his chair. "Is this true?" she asked quietly. "Emma, those documents could be fabricated. Your mother has clearly been listening to someone with a grudge against our family." "Stop!" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "Just stop lying to me." She turned to Patricia, Nicole. "How many women have you done this to?" Nicole had given up all pretense of being the grieving mother-in-law. Her face was hard, calculating, showing the predator that had been hiding underneath the grandmother mask. "You wouldn't understand," Nicole said coldly. "You've never had to work for anything in your life. Money has always been easy for you. So, you decided to take mine. We decided to earn it. Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend to love someone like you? Do you know how hard it is to listen to your boring stories about your company and pretend to care about your success?" The mask was completely off now. Emma was seeing Nicole exactly as she really was. A cold, manipulative criminal who'd been playing a role for months. "And you," Emma turned back to Marcus. "Did you ever feel anything real for me? Even for a minute?" Marcus actually smiled. It was the first genuine expression I'd seen from him, and it was chilling. "Emma, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether I felt anything real for you. The question is whether you would have felt anything real for me if I hadn't been playing the part of the perfect husband." "What do you mean?" "I mean you didn't fall in love with me. Emma, you fell in love with a fantasy, a Harvard-educated aristocrat with family money and old-world charm. If I'd walked into that country club as Marcus Delacroix, high school dropout from the French Quarter, would you have given me a second glance?" The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. He was destroying her not just financially, but emotionally, making her question not just his feelings, but her own. "You created a character you thought I wanted," Marcus continued, "and then you fell in love with your own creation. I was just the actor playing the part." Emma's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to run to me when the bigger kids picked on her at school. But then something changed in her expression. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by something harder. "You know what, Marcus? You're right about one thing. I did fall in love with a fantasy. But you made a mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed I was just another rich victim who would roll over and die quietly when you decided it was time. But I'm Margaret Walsh's daughter, and Margaret Walsh's daughter doesn't go down without a fight." Emma pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I'd like to report a fraud in progress," she said calmly, "and possibly attempted murder." That's when Marcus and Nicole decided they weren't going quietly after all. The moment Emma said the word murder, everything exploded into chaos. Marcus lunged across the table, knocking over wine glasses and reaching for Emma's phone. Nicole bolted toward the front door, but stopped when she realized Tommy was blocking it. My nephew had apparently decided monitoring from the van wasn't sufficient protection. Emma dodged Marcus's grab, but tripped over her chair and went down hard. I heard her phone skitter across the hardwood floor as she fell. "Tommy!" I shouted, but he was already moving, tackling Nicole before she could reach the back door. Marcus had Emma pinned against the wall, one hand over her mouth, the other reaching into his jacket for something I really didn't want to see. You know what's funny about spending 30 years breaking up high school fights? You learn that the element of surprise is everything. Marcus was so focused on Emma, he never saw my mother's cast-iron skillet coming. I hit him square in the back of the head with enough force to drop a charging bull. He crumpled to the floor like a deflated balloon. "Nice swing, Aunt Margaret," Tommy said, still wrestling with Nicole. "But we've got a problem." "What problem?" "She's got a gun." I looked down and saw the small pistol in Nicole's hand pointed directly at Tommy's chest. Her grandmother act was completely gone now, replaced by someone who looked entirely capable of murder. "Everybody shut up and listen," Nicole snarled. "Here's what's going to happen. Margaret, you're going to help me get Marcus up and out to our car. Tommy, you're going to let me go, or I'm going to put a bullet in your chest." "Nicole," I said calmly, Or should I call you whatever your real name is today? My name is Nicole Beaumont, and I've been doing this a lot longer than you've been playing amateur detective. Yes, I know. I read about Houston, about Helen Crawford's mysterious accident 3 days after she changed her will. Nicole's eyes narrowed. Helen Crawford was a lonely old woman who was going to die anyway. We just made sure her money went to people who would use it properly. And Diane Foster in Orlando? Another lonely old woman? Diane was a drunk. She killed herself with pills and alcohol. We just happened to benefit from it. Emma was helping Marcus sit up. Blood trickling from where the skillet had connected with his skull. He was conscious, but groggy, which was fine by me. And what was the plan for Emma? I asked, keeping my voice conversational. Another mysterious accident? Emma was going to overdose on sleeping pills next week, Nicole said matter-of-factly. Accidental, of course. Wealthy women take so many prescriptions these days. Very easy to mix up the dosages. I heard Emma gasp, but I kept my focus on Nicole. The longer I could keep her talking, the better our chances. But I ruined that plan by asking questions. You ruined nothing. We'll just have to be more creative now. Maybe a home invasion gone wrong, or a car accident. Rich women drive such dangerous cars. Nicole, Tommy said quietly, you're confessing to multiple murders while being recorded. You might want to think about that. Nicole laughed. You think I care about recordings? In 10 minutes we'll be gone. And you'll all be dead. Marcus has been planning for contingencies since we got to this boring city. That's when I realized we had a much bigger problem than one gun. What contingencies? I asked. Fire, Marcus mumbled, touching the back of his head and wincing. Gas leak in the basement. Place will go up like a matchbook. My blood turned to ice. You did something to my house? Insurance investigation will show faulty gas lines, Nicole confirmed. Old house, old pipes, tragic accident. 4 bodies found in the wreckage after an apparent family dinner went wrong. You psychopathic, Emma started, but Nicole cut her off. Enough talking. Margaret, help Marcus to the car, now. I looked at my daughter, at Tommy, at the home I'd lived in for 30 years that was apparently rigged to explode. Then I made a decision that probably saved all our lives. Okay, I said. I'll help you. Emma and Tommy both stared at me in shock. Mom, what are you doing? Emma whispered. I'm being practical, I said. Nicole, you're right. You've been doing this longer than I've been investigating. I'm a 62-year-old retired teacher. You're a professional criminal. I know when I'm outmatched. Nicole smiled triumphantly. Smart woman. But I have one question before I help you kill my daughter. What? How much time do we have before the gas explosion? Nicole checked her watch. About 6 minutes. Good. That's plenty of time. Plenty of time for what? That's when I smiled back at her. For the police to get here. Nicole's face went white. What are you talking about? I mean, the police have been listening to this entire conversation through the recording equipment my nephew installed. And they've been tracking your cell phone since yesterday when Tommy hacked into your communications. And they've had this house surrounded since you walked through my front door tonight. You're lying. Tommy, I said, would you mind letting Detective Rodriguez know it's safe to come in now? Tommy, bless his heart, was quick on the uptake. Already done, Aunt Margaret. They're moving into position now. The look on Nicole's face was worth everything I'd been through in the past week. Confusion, then fear, then pure rage. You set us up, she snarled. I set you up, I confirmed. Just like you set up Helen Crawford and Diane Foster and God knows how many other women. The difference is, I did it to save my daughter's life. You did it for money. Nicole was looking around wildly now, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Marcus was struggling to stand up, still dazed from his encounter with my kitchenware. That's when the front door burst open and 6 police officers flooded into my dining room. Denver police, drop your weapons, get on the ground now. Nicole looked at the gun in her hand, then at the officers pointing much larger guns at her, then back at me. This isn't over, she said. Yes, I replied, it is. She dropped the gun and put her hands up. Marcus collapsed back onto the floor, either from the head injury or the realization that their perfect con had just turned into a life sentence. As the officers handcuffed Nicole and called for paramedics for Marcus, Detective Rodriguez approached me. Mrs. Walsh, that was incredibly dangerous. If they'd had backup outside, or if the gas leak had been real. Detective, I'm a retired teacher. Do you know what the most dangerous part of teaching is? What's that, ma'am? Parent-teacher conferences. After 40 years of dealing with parents who think their little angels can do no wrong, a couple of con artists don't seem that scary. Emma burst into tears and threw her arms around me. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. Sweetheart, you couldn't have known. These people are professionals. They've been doing this for years. But the voucher, the way I treated you, Emma, the voucher doesn't matter. What matters is that you're safe. But it does matter. Mom, it matters because I let them convince me that you were the problem, that you were jealous and interfering instead of trying to protect me. Detective Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mrs. Walsh, we're going to need full statements from all of you. But first, we should probably check that gas leak story. 20 minutes later, the fire department confirmed that Marcus hadn't been bluffing about that either. They found a sophisticated timing device in my basement that would have turned my entire house into a fireball at exactly 9:47 p.m. It was now 9:52. We'd missed becoming a tragic news story by exactly 5 minutes. 3 days later, I was sitting in Detective Rodriguez's office reviewing the final details of what the police were calling the Morrison-Beaumont fraud case. We found evidence of at least 6 other victims, Detective Rodriguez told me. Going back 8 years, the total amount stolen is close to $14 million. How many of them died? 3 that we can confirm. Helen Crawford in Houston, Diane Foster in Orlando, and a woman named Patricia Weber in Miami. All supposedly accidental deaths that occurred right after they'd signed over power of attorney or changed their wills. I sat back in my chair, feeling overwhelmed. Emma could have been number 4. She would have been, if you hadn't figured out their game. What happens now? Marcus, his real name is Michael Brennan, by the way, is looking at charges in 4 states. Murder, fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. And Nicole? Nicole Beaumont is actually Sarah Chen. She's got warrants in 3 states under 2 other identities. She's also looking at life in prison. Detective Rodriguez handed me a thick folder. These are copies of all their communications that your nephew intercepted. Fair warning, some of it's hard to read. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and read through every text message, every email, every recorded phone call between Marcus and Nicole. It was like getting a masterclass in human evil. They'd been planning Emma's murder for months, not just planning it, but enjoying the process, making jokes about how easy it was to fool her, placing bets on how long it would take her to sign the power of attorney documents, laughing about my pathetic attempts to interfere. The worst part was reading their analysis of Emma's personality. They'd studied her like scientists studying a lab rat, cataloging her weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Target is intelligent but emotionally needy, one of Nicole's reports read. Responds well to validation about her business success. Mother clearly represents authority figure she's trying to escape. Use this. Emma craves stability and traditional family structure, Marcus had written. Lost her father young, was raised by strong mother figure. She'll be drawn to older man who represents security and social status. They'd gotten into Emma's head so completely that they could predict her responses to their manipulation. They knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly what lies to tell, exactly how to make her distrust the one person who was trying to protect her. Me. My phone rang while I was reading. Emma. Mom, are you okay? You sounded strange when I called earlier. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just reading through some of the police reports. You don't have to do that. It's over. I know. I need to understand how they did it, how they got so deep into your life without you seeing who they really were. There was a long pause. Mom, I've been thinking about that too, and I realized something. What? They didn't just fool me about who they were. They fooled me about who you were. I didn't understand. What do you mean? I mean they spent months making me think you were the problem, that you were jealous of my success, threatened by my independence, resentful of my money. They convinced me that your concerns about them were really concerns about losing control over me. I remembered all those conversations where Emma had dismissed my questions. All those times she'd accused me of not understanding her new life. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Mom, they made me see you as the enemy, so I wouldn't listen when you tried to warn me. And it worked perfectly. I could hear tears in her voice. Sweetheart, you couldn't have known. But I should have trusted you. After everything you've done for me, everything you sacrificed to raise me, I should have known that if you were worried about something, there was a good reason. Emma, do you know what Marcus said to me when they were arresting him? What? He said the hardest part of the con was pretending to respect you. He said you were obviously a bitter old woman who couldn't stand that your daughter had outgrown her need for a mother. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Oh, Emma. And I realized that for months I'd been treating you exactly like that, like a bitter old woman who couldn't accept her daughter's success. You were being manipulated by professionals. That's not an excuse. You raised me to be smarter than that, to be more loyal than that. I could tell this conversation was breaking her heart, and it was breaking mine too. Emma, listen to me. You are the best thing I ever did with my life. You are brilliant and successful and kind, and I am proud of you every single day. What happened doesn't change any of that. But I treated you terribly. You treated me like a daughter who was trying to build her own life. There's nothing terrible about that. The Christmas present was petty and mean, and you've already apologized for it. We're done talking about the Christmas present. There was another long pause. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. How did you know? I mean really know, not just suspect. What made you absolutely certain they were criminals? I thought about that for a moment. It wasn't any one thing. It was a pattern. Too many stories that didn't quite add up. Too many coincidences. Too many times their eyes went cold when they thought no one was watching. But you started investigating before you had proof. Yes. Why? What made you think it was worth the risk? I smiled, thinking about my daughter as a little girl, so serious and determined even then. Because you're my daughter, Emma, and mothers don't let their children get hurt if there's anything they can do to stop it. It's that simple. Even when their children are terrible to them? Especially then. Because being terrible to your mother usually means you're in some kind of trouble. She was crying now. I could hear it. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about the past week, about how close I'd come to losing Emma forever, about how easy it had been for two criminals to nearly destroy our relationship, but also about how strong the bond between a mother and daughter really is. Strong enough to survive manipulation, strong enough to overcome pride and stubbornness, strong enough to save lives when it matters most. The doorbell rang at 9 p.m. I opened it to find Emma standing on my porch, carrying a suitcase. I was wondering if I could stay here tonight, she said. The mansion feels too big right now. Too empty. Of course. But Emma, you don't have to. Mom, I want to. If that's okay. It's more than okay. I helped her carry her suitcase to her old bedroom, the one I'd kept exactly the same since she'd moved out years ago. The twin bed with the pink comforter, the desk where she'd done her homework, the walls still decorated with her high school achievement awards. It looks exactly the same, she said, sitting on the bed. I always hoped you'd come home to visit. I'm sorry it took a near-death experience to get me here. Emma, we've both apologized enough. From now on, we're only moving forward. She nodded, then looked around the room again. You know what's funny? This room feels safer than anywhere I've been in months. Even knowing that Marcus and Nicole had been in this house, planning to kill us all. Why? Because this is where you protected me when I was growing up. And now you've protected me again. I sat down next to her on the bed. You know what I figured out this week? What? That being a mother never stops. It doesn't matter if your child is 10 years old or 35 years old. It doesn't matter if they're living in your house or living in a mansion across town. When someone threatens your child, you respond the same way you did when they were small. You fight back. You fight back, I confirmed. And you don't stop fighting until they're safe. Emma leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when she was little and needed comfort. I'm going to sell the mansion, she said quietly. Emma, you don't have to do that. What happened there wasn't your fault. I know, but I don't want to live there anymore. Too many bad memories. Too many reminders of how easily I was fooled. So where will you live? I was thinking maybe I could look for something closer to you. Maybe somewhere in this neighborhood. I smiled. That would be nice. And Mom? I want to start having dinner together once a week. Real dinner, where we actually talk about our lives. I'd like that very much. And maybe you could teach me to cook some of your recipes. I've been eating restaurant food for so long, I've forgotten what real home cooking tastes like. Emma, are you sure this is what you want? You've built an incredible life for yourself. I've built an incredible career for myself. But I forgot to build a life. I forgot about the things that actually matter. What things? Family, real relationships, people who care about you for who you really are, not for how much money you have. She was quiet for a moment, then added, Marcus was right about one thing. I did fall in love with a fantasy, but it wasn't just about him. I fell in love with the fantasy of who I thought I was supposed to be. Rich, independent, living in a mansion, married to someone from old money. And now? Now I want to be someone real. Someone who knows the difference between people who love her and people who want to use her. I hugged my daughter tight, thinking about how much we'd both learned in the past week. Emma, you want to know a secret? What? That $30 massage voucher? I never used it. Why not? Because every time I looked at it, it reminded me that something was wrong with your life, and I knew I needed to stay alert until I figured out what it was. Emma laughed through her tears. So, in a weird way, it was the perfect gift after all. In a very weird way, yes. Should we frame it? Absolutely not. Some reminders are better forgotten. But as we sat there in Emma's childhood bedroom, I realized that wasn't true. The best reminders, the ones about love and loyalty and the lengths mothers will go to protect their children, those are the ones worth keeping forever. Sarchi, 2 weeks after Marcus and Nicole were arrested, I got a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about their case. Mrs. Walsh, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. Could you come to our field office this afternoon? There's been a development in the Morrison-Beaumont investigation. What kind of development? The kind that's better discussed in person. The FBI field office was nothing like I'd imagined. Less dramatic lighting and more fluorescent bulbs than the movies would have you believe. Agent Chen turned out to be a serious woman about Emma's age, with kind eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty. Mrs. Walsh, thank you for coming. I want to start by saying that your investigation was remarkable. Without your work, we would never have uncovered the scope of this operation. Operation? That's what I wanted to discuss with you. Marcus Brennan and Sarah Chen, the people you knew as Bradley and Patricia Morrison, weren't working alone. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Agent Chen opened a thick file and spread photos across the conference table. We've been tracking an organized crime ring that specializes in long-term confidence schemes targeting wealthy individuals. What happened to your daughter wasn't random. It was part of a much larger operation. She pointed to a photo of a distinguished older man I'd never seen before. This is Vincent Torres. He runs the organization that trained and deployed Marcus and Sarah. They've been operating for over 15 years. How many victims? 43 that we've identified so far. Total theft amounts to over $60 million, and Mrs. Walsh, at least 12 of those victims died under suspicious circumstances. I stared at the photos, feeling sick. They've been doing this for 15 years? Torres recruits people like Marcus and Sarah, intelligent, attractive criminals with flexible consciences. He trains them in long-term manipulation techniques, provides them with false identities, and sends them to target wealthy individuals. How do they choose their targets? Very carefully. They look for people who have money, but also emotional vulnerabilities. Recent widows, successful women who've never married, people who've been isolated from their families by circumstances. Agent Chen pulled out another photo. Emma fit their profile perfectly. Young, wealthy, no close family except for you. Hungry for the kind of traditional family structure she'd never had. So they created Bradley Morrison specifically to appeal to her. Exactly. Torres's organization maintains extensive psychological profiles on potential targets. They knew exactly what kind of man Emma would fall for before Marcus ever introduced himself to her. The scope of it was overwhelming. Agent Chen, how did you find out about Torres? Sarah Chen broke yesterday. She talked? She did more than talk. She offered to testify against Torres in exchange for a plea deal. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this. Why would she do that? Because Torres had a backup plan for your situation. When it became clear that you were interfering with their operation, Torres ordered them to eliminate not just Emma, but you as well. Sarah claims she was willing to go through with Emma's murder, but killing you wasn't part of their original agreement. So she has moral boundaries after all. More like professional boundaries. Sarah Chen is a sociopath, Mrs. Walsh. She doesn't feel guilt or remorse about her crimes, but she does feel anger when her boss changes the rules without consulting her. Agent Chen showed me transcripts of recorded conversations between Torres and his team. These are from Sarah's phone. She was recording Torres without his knowledge, probably as insurance in case something went wrong. I read through the conversations, growing more horrified with each page. Torres wasn't just running a criminal organization. He was running a murder-for-profit scheme disguised as romance scams. Mrs. Walsh, there's something else you need to know. Torres is coming to Denver. What? He's concerned about how much attention this case has generated. He wants to clean up loose ends personally. What kind of loose ends? Agent Chen met my eyes. You, Emma, and your nephew Tommy. Torres views all of you as witnesses who could damage his organization. I felt like the room was spinning. Are you saying he's coming here to kill us? That's exactly what I'm saying. Sarah Chen provided us with copies of his instructions to a local team. They're planning to make it look like a murder-suicide. The story will be that you couldn't handle the stress of discovering your daughter's husband was a criminal. So you killed Emma and Tommy, then yourself. When? Soon. Maybe tonight. I stood up abruptly. I need to call Emma and Tommy. Mrs. Walsh, sit down. We're already handling this. Handling it how? We're going to use you as bait. I stared at Agent Chen like she'd suggested I juggle flaming torches. Excuse me? Torres is smart, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's dealing with a retired schoolteacher who got lucky. He has no idea that we know he's coming, or that Sarah Chen has been feeding us information about his operation. So you want me to, what? Sit in my house and wait for professional killers to show up? We want you to maintain your normal routine while we monitor Torres's team. When they make their move, we'll be ready. Agent Chen, with all due respect, that's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. Mrs. Walsh? No, absolutely not. I'm not using my daughter and nephew as bait for a crime boss who's already killed at least 12 people. Agent Chen leaned forward. Mrs. Walsh, Torres is going to come after you whether we catch him now or later. This way we control the circumstances. We choose the location, we choose the timing, and we have backup ready. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. We've done this before. I thought about that for a long moment. Then I thought about something else. Agent Chen, what if I said I had a better idea? What kind of idea? The kind that turns the hunter into the hunted. The kind that gives Torres exactly what he thinks he wants, right up until the moment he realizes he's made a fatal mistake. Mrs. Walsh, you're not a trained agent. No, but I am a trained teacher. And after 40 years of dealing with bullies, I've learned something important about them. What's that? They always underestimate the people they think are weak, and that overconfidence is always their downfall. Agent Chen studied my face for a long moment. What did you have in mind? I smiled. I'm going to give Vincent Torres the performance of his life, and when it's over, he's going to wish he'd never heard the name Margaret Walsh. But first, I had some shopping to do. Because if I was going to take down a crime boss, I was going to need more than just a cast iron skillet. Though I have to admit, that skillet had served me pretty well so far. Vincent Torres was nothing like I'd expected a crime boss to look. When he walked into the coffee shop where I'd agreed to meet him, he looked like someone's grandfather heading to church. Silver hair, kind eyes, expensive but conservative suit. The kind of man you'd trust to hold your purse while you used the restroom, which I supposed was exactly the point. Mrs. Walsh, he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me. I know this situation has been terribly difficult for your family. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the genuine warmth in his voice. This man could probably convince you to hand over your life savings while making you feel grateful for the opportunity. Mr. Torres, I appreciate you coming to Denver personally. When Agent Chen told me you wanted to discuss a resolution to this whole mess, I was intrigued. We sat at a corner table in the busy Starbucks, just two older people having coffee and conversation. Nothing suspicious to any casual observer. Torres even ordered a decaf latte and a blueberry scone, playing his grandfather role to perfection. Mrs. Walsh, I want to start by apologizing. The people who targeted your daughter were operating outside my organization's guidelines. When I discovered what they were planning, I was horrified. His performance was flawless. The right amount of concern, the perfect balance of authority and humility. If I hadn't known what he really was, I would have believed every word. What guidelines would those be, Mr. Torres? We run a sophisticated financial consulting firm, Mrs. Walsh. Sometimes our methods are unconventional, but we never intended for anyone to be harmed. You mean besides the 12 people who died during previous consultations? Torres's mask slipped for just a moment, a flicker of surprise that I knew the real scope of his operation. Then the grandfather's smile returned. I think there's been some misunderstanding about my business, Mrs. Walsh, perhaps fed to you by federal agents who are more interested in building a case than finding the truth. And what is the truth, Mr. Torres? The truth is that I run a legitimate business helping wealthy individuals optimize their financial portfolios. Sometimes that involves complex estate planning, trust management, even arranged marriages between compatible parties. Arranged marriages? Think of it as high-end matchmaking, Mrs. Walsh. Wealthy people often have trouble finding partners who aren't interested in their money. We provide introductions to individuals who already have their own resources. It was a beautiful story. Elegant, plausible, just close enough to reality to sound believable. He was selling me the same fantasy he'd probably sold to dozens of other victims' families. That's fascinating, Mr. Torres. But I'm curious about something. What's that? If Marcus and Sarah were operating outside your guidelines, why are you here? Why not just distance yourself from them and move on? Torres smiled like I'd asked exactly the question he'd been hoping for. Because, Mrs. Walsh, I believe in taking responsibility for my employees' actions, even when they act against orders. How noble of you. I'd like to offer your family compensation for what you've been through. Significant compensation. Now we were getting to the real purpose of this meeting. What kind of compensation? $2 million, Mrs. Walsh, tax-free, deposited into accounts of your choosing. All I need in exchange is your agreement not to cooperate further with the federal investigation. It was a generous offer. Life-changing money for someone like me. The kind of offer that would tempt anyone who'd been through what my family had experienced. That's very generous, I said. But I have a counteroffer. Torres raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. How about instead of $2 million, you turn yourself in to the FBI and spend the rest of your life in prison where you belong? The grandfather mask disappeared completely. For the first time since walking into the coffee shop, I was looking at the real Vincent Torres, and he was absolutely terrifying. Mrs. Walsh, he said quietly, I think you misunderstand your situation. I understand it perfectly. You're a murderer who makes money by convincing people to trust you, then stealing everything they own before killing them. You came here because you're worried that your former employees will testify against you, and you want to eliminate the witnesses who could corroborate their testimony. You're making a serious mistake. Actually, Mr. Torres, you're the one who made the mistake. What mistake? You assumed I was just another scared victim who would take your money and keep quiet. But you forgot something important about me. What's that? I'm a retired teacher, and teachers don't negotiate with bullies. Torres leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. Mrs. Walsh, do you know how many people have tried to threaten me over the years? I'm not threatening you. Mr. Torres, I'm promising you. Promising me what? That you're going to prison, that your organization is going to be dismantled, and that the families of all your victims are going to get justice. Torres actually smiled. And how exactly do you plan to accomplish that? The same way I exposed Marcus and Sarah, by being smarter than you. Mrs. Walsh, you're 62 years old with no law enforcement training, no federal resources, and no protection. I have people in this city who can make you disappear tonight. Probably. But here's the thing about making people disappear, Mr. Torres. It only works if nobody's expecting them to vanish. What do you mean? I mean this entire conversation has been recorded and transmitted to the FBI. I mean Agent Chen and 6 federal agents have been listening to every word you've said. And I mean you just confessed to multiple murders while threatening to kill me. Torres went very still. You're bluffing. Agent Chen, I said, speaking to the small microphone pinned to my sweater. Would you mind confirming for Mr. Torres that I'm not bluffing? Torres spun around as Agent Chen approached our table from across the coffee shop, followed by two other agents who'd been posing as customers. "Vincent Torres," Agent Chen said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and about 40 other charges we'll discuss downtown." Torres looked back at me with something approaching respect. "You played this very well, Mrs. Walsh." "Thank you. I learned from the best." "Who's that?" "My students. 40 years of teaching teenagers taught me everything I need to know about dealing with people who think they're smarter than everyone else." As they handcuffed Torres and led him away, Agent Chen sat down across from me. "That was excellent work, Mrs. Walsh. His confession, combined with Sarah Chen's testimony, should be enough to dismantle his entire organization. What happens to Emma now? Is she safe?" "She's safe. Torres was the head of the operation. With him in custody and his local team arrested, there's no one left to threaten your family." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "And the other victims' families?" "Torres's organization kept detailed records. We'll be able to identify most of the victims and hopefully recover some of the stolen assets." That evening, Emma and I sat in my kitchen, sharing a dinner I'd cooked for just the two of us. She'd been staying in her old bedroom for the past 2 weeks, and I was getting used to having her around again. "Mom," she said, passing me the mashed potatoes, "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about being real versus being successful." "What about it?" "I realized I've spent the last 10 years building a life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt empty on the inside. All that money, all that success, but no real relationships, no one who actually knew who I was. Success isn't a bad thing, Emma. You should be proud of what you've accomplished." "I am proud, but I want to be proud of more than just my bank balance." "Like what?" "Like having the kind of mother who would risk her life to save me. Like being the kind of daughter who deserves that sacrifice." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Emma, you've always been the kind of daughter who deserves everything good in the world. Even when I gave you a $30 massage voucher for Christmas?" I laughed. "Especially then, actually. That voucher saved your life, remember?" "How do you figure?" "Because it was so obviously cruel that it made me realize something was seriously wrong with your life. If Marcus and Sarah had convinced you to give me a nice present, I might not have started investigating." Emma smiled. "So in a weird way, they outsmarted themselves. Evil usually does, eventually. People who spend their lives manipulating others tend to forget that real relationships are based on love, not control." "Speaking of real relationships," Emma said, "I've been thinking about making some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I want to start a foundation. Something that helps victims of financial fraud, especially older women who've been targeted by romance scams." "Emma, that's a wonderful idea. I was hoping you might want to help me run it. I mean, if you're interested in coming out of retirement." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw the woman she'd become. Successful, yes, but also kind. Rich, yes, but also generous. And finally, wise enough to know the difference between people who wanted to use her and people who wanted to love her. "Emma," I said, "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." 6 months later, the Margaret and Emma Walsh Foundation for Fraud Prevention opened its doors in downtown Denver. Our first client was a 70-year-old widow from Houston, whose grandson had stolen her retirement savings. Our second was a businessman from Phoenix, who'd lost everything to a fake investment scheme. By the end of our first year, we'd helped recover over $3 million in stolen assets and provided counseling services to more than 200 fraud victims. Emma kept her promise about weekly dinners. Every Sunday, she comes to my house and I teach her to cook something new. Last week, it was my mother's famous pot roast. This week, we're trying homemade bread. She also kept her promise about buying a house in my neighborhood. She's 3 blocks away now, in a charming Tudor that's 1/10 the size of her old mansion, but feels infinitely more like home. As for Marcus and Sarah, they're both serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Vincent Torres died in federal custody while awaiting trial. Natural causes, according to the autopsy, though I suspect the stress of facing 43 murder charges might have contributed to his heart attack. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd just accepted that $30 massage voucher gracefully, if I'd minded my own business and let Emma live her life without interference from her worried mother. She'd be dead now, and Marcus and Sarah would be living in her mansion, planning their next con. But that's not what happened. What happened is that a retired school teacher remembered everything she'd learned about bullies and liars during 40 years of teaching. What happened is that a mother's love turned out to be stronger than professional criminals' greed. And what happened is that my brilliant, successful, beautiful daughter learned something that all her business school classes had never taught her: the difference between people who want to be part of your life and people who want to take your life away. The massage voucher is framed now, hanging in our foundation's lobby with a small plaque that reads, "Sometimes the worst gifts lead to the best outcomes." Visitors often ask about it. Emma loves telling them the story of how a $30 insult helped save her life and led to the recovery of millions of dollars in stolen assets. But I think the real moral of the story is simpler than that. Love doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like. Sometimes love looks like a mother who asks uncomfortable questions. Sometimes love looks like suspicion instead of trust. Sometimes love looks like a cast-iron skillet to the back of a con artist's head. And sometimes, just sometimes, love looks like a $30 massage voucher that proves to a mother that something is terribly wrong with her daughter's life. Because the best gifts aren't always the most expensive ones. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones that save your life. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.